This is Günter Kloucek. Welcome to our podcast on the topic of Agile Leadership. I'm speaking today with Duarte Marchand, Head of Nordics and GM in Norway at Takeda, one of the top 10 pharmaceutical companies. I'm Director at OXYGY, leading the global life science practice. We are in the business of helping clients rethink, innovate, and implement new ways of working. Personally, I focus a lot of my consulting time on working with leaders and leadership teams on their effectiveness. Prior to consulting, I've been working in pharmaceutical industries in several local and regional roles for more than 25 years. Now, why Agile Leadership? Obviously, life science, as many other industries, is facing unprecedented change, demanding for business model innovation and new ways of working. Leaders are increasingly aware that their organizations need to become more adaptive and more innovative, and that they play a pivotal role in creating such adaptive organizations. In this podcast, we are discussing what leadership capabilities are needed and how to develop them. I'm delighted to have Duarte here with me today. Duarte, may I ask you to briefly introduce yourself?
Absolutely, Günter. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. My name is, as you said, Duarte Marchand. I'm the head of Nordics and general manager in Takeda. I'm originally from Portugal, and I've been working either for consulting related for pharma or in pharma for all of my life. I'm delighted to be here and very passionate about the subjects of agility. So I look forward to discussing with you.
No doubt, Duarte, agility is a hot topic today. However, there is a lot of talking, and agility is seen as buzzword by many. So what did you do to make it more tangible for your organization?
Well, it is a buzzword, and I think that, you know, as many other leaders, we try to run away from buzzwords because they take a life of their own. And what we've tried to do as much as possible is to stop talking so much about what agility is and start talking about what are the core principles behind agility that we need to address. So at Takeda, we've focused around 4 core principles. First one is about simplification. Simplicity needs to be at the forefront of everything that we do. Adaptability, being able to, as an organization, adapt to changes in the environment faster than what we've been doing up till now. Betting everything that we can on innovation. That's a big tradition in the pharmaceutical sector. We need to reinvent our portfolio every 10 years once the patents are expired. And last but not least, collaboration. That's really key, and it can take a big spectrum of collaboration, not only internally or externally, but also across sectors to be able to evolve.
So organizations actually don't change, people do. And to make agile work, it needs to go down to the level of personal behavior. If I understood you correctly, the framework you have implemented, this psych framework, is your basis to drive behavioral change in your organization. So how are you translating this psych framework into appropriate functional or individual behavior?
It's not an easy process to actually do that. Once we've introduced these principles and we started to detail what exactly are we going to be changing in the way that we operate to reach these higher goals, we've soon understood that there were different type of employees that were in different change journey pathways. First, you got the enthusiasts, the ones that absolutely love, the possibility to go faster, to move at a higher pace, and they are, early adapters. They're onboarding, they're experimenting, and they're really looking at opportunities to be able to contribute. We've leveraged a lot on those. We've created what we call accelerator projects that are, in many cases, are having these people on board first. But you need to be very careful because you can also alienate the rest of the organization if you focus only on this onboarding. So we've created training pathways to get everyone at the minimum level of understanding of what we want to achieve for everyone. And we're now slowly but steadily onboarding more and more people into these ways of working by building champions that can attract other people. There's also another key element that I think it's important. If you focus on implementing agility by focusing on changing processes alone, then the likelihood of yielding the outcome that you want to is a lot lower than if you focus on changing processes and culture at the same time. And we've dedicated a significant proportion of leadership time, of time on training around culture.
I cannot agree more that the cultural aspect is a really important one, and that leaders play a pivotal role in this agile transformation. Now, what competency, skills, and behaviors do leaders need in order to create and lead agile organizations and especially foster a side way of working?
Well, there's several of them, and I'll probably will not be able to cover all of them, but definitely there are a few leadership behaviors that you need to reflect. You know, to maximize an agile approach, you cannot have a lot of top-down demandings in the organization. You need to be willing to let go and create small teams that can move a lot faster in your organization than aligning with 1,000 stakeholders to get to the perfect solution. Agile is the opposite of the perfect solution, is to going from 80% till 80% until that the end solution is better than 100%, but neither of the individual solutions is actually 100% there. That demands a significant change from leadership perspective on what are the tools that you use to be able to lead that are no longer top down, but a lot more about framing, you know, which teams do you select to be able to go on given projects? How much experimentation do you allow and where within your organization? And how much do you need to give input or take away and step back to let the teams be ready to flourish by themselves?
How do you build the required leadership capabilities and behaviors?
It's a journey. It's a journey that you need to do with your leadership teams and their leadership teams to make sure that you get there. So the first thing is that you need to treat your leaders as human beings themselves. So they are also going through the change curve, most likely slightly ahead of the rest of the organization, but you need to make sure that you allow them to fail, that they feel secure, that if they take the steps and the leap to either let go or create an experimentation team or choose a pivotal project to be part of an agile team, that you are giving them the psychological safety to be able to fail if they need to. That's one of the key points. The second is that your leaders need to be the champions of the learning process. So that's a big thing that I try to instill in my teams. It's okay to fail. It's not acceptable not to learn from the failure. And that's really important. And you can only have that if your leaders are unafraid to talk about failure and if they instill the culture of learning from that failure so that we can build on for a better solution later on. And
so creating a learning culture and reframing failure as source of learning is a key piece leaders need to convey with words and actions in the organization and help everybody to feel comfortable with this approach. Now, you mentioned previously in our conversation the importance of, let's say, willingness of leaders to slacken the reins a bit and to push down decision into the organization. Changing yourself starts with changing beliefs, and all leaders have beliefs that drive her or his behavior. And unfortunately, some of these behaviors are not that helpful in creating agile organizations, and such as I'm accountable, I better decide myself, or a classic is trust is good, control is better. and thereby sending signals of distrust and disempowerment into the organization. What are, for you, fundamental beliefs agile leaders should have?
The first, perhaps, belief is that being closest to the patients gives you an advantage to how are you going to be able to add value. If you as a leader have a belief that being closest to the patients is going to be able to add that value, then it's going to be a lot easier for you to say, wait a minute, the people that are closest to the patients are the people in my team. So we should empower them to actually be the ones coming up with the solutions. The second piece that I think it's also tremendously important to really consider is that you need to be willing to experiment new things. If there is a mind frame of trying to maintain status quo as much as possible, it's going to be very difficult to implement Agile. So if you have within your workforce, within your leadership teams, people that are willing to experiment and wanting to experiment, that creates a virtuous cycle, which is that you start experimenting, you attract more people that want to experiment into your own cycle, and that will generate further experimentation that will help you get out of the stagnation.
I know you're using the DISC model to help leaders to adapt their behavior. How are you doing that? Can you please explore a bit on that topic?
Sure, absolutely. Some of the first reflections that I've had is how were people with the different colors in the DISC module actually reacting to the agile ways of working, and first reactions and secondary reactions were very different from different types of modules. And obviously it is individualized. It's difficult to create a stereotype for all the colors in the module, but you do see some trends. You do see some people that are more creative and want to experiment a lot more at the beginning, and then later on maybe a bit disappointed that they are not able to follow through on some of these things, while you perhaps get some more analytical people shocked at the beginning, and that when they find their own rhythm to explore, that they can flourish around this. So I think also understanding how your team is composed, getting the diversity on the team, and leveraging the benefits of each one of these to complement into the transformation is really important. And asking leaders to reflect on their own teams, on what kind of compositions do they have, what's going to be the tensions that are going to be created by the implementation of these agile ways of working into their own teams based on the profiles that they have, and address that from a leadership perspective, really having a clear understanding of what your team is good at or not good at. There's perhaps another element that we didn't speak about, but I'm reflecting more and more about it. It's also about the leader needing to know what's the level of maturity that the team has to be able to implement this. And teams that are a lot more mature are those that you really need to step out of the way and let them go and do things, while teams that are a lot more immature in their thinking around this is where you need to give a lot more inputs and be a lot more present around to make sure that they are empowered but supported, that they don't feel that they are just thrown out there and not being able to achieve any of the results because they don't know what to achieve.
Yeah. I think it's very insightful, asking the questions once you have decided or show your willingness to empower your organization. Start with the question, how ready is my organization to embrace this new level of freedom and to accept accountability and responsibility. So to conclude our sessions, for building and leading agile organizations, leaders need to create the right environment and build enterprise agility into the operating model and the culture of the whole organization. Then they have to coach their teams to work in new and different ways. And as organizations take on the personality of its collective leaders, the leader have to role model the change in behavior they expect of everyone in the organization, including themselves. And being aware of your leadership beliefs and your personality, for instance, with the DISC model or DISC profile, and using this insight for targeted development may be a helpful approach for sustainable behavior change. Duarte, thank you very much for this insightful conversation.
My pleasure, Günter.